you really want to find a product or like a market where there's like people that are using you casually, but then there's like a professional upsell version of that.
How many users do you get like in that first month, for example?
Like million or something.
Wow.
Like we grew to 1 million in revenue relatively quickly.
How fast?
A few months, 5 months, 6 months. We pretty quickly hit like an 8-figure run rate. Been really exciting too is also seeing like the enterprise adoption. I think we sign like an enterprise contract every couple of days now. Like pretty big ones now too. And that's without outbound sales. And I think I've said this a lot, that free users can be really false signal, that like just because someone uses it for free doesn't mean it's something that solves like a core pain point.
That's product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
I called it the product market fit question.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit. Product market fit.
I mean, the name of the show is Product Market Fit.
Do you think the product market fit show has product market fit? Because if you do, then there's something you just have to do. You have to take out your phone. You have to leave the show 5 stars. It lets us reach more founders and it lets us get better guests. Thank you. Michael, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks so much for having me. It's good to be here.
Dude, so AI is, I mean, obviously changing everything. And you have one of the hottest kind of AI apps right now. Tell us maybe a little bit, I mean, I've played around with it, but maybe give us just a short idea of what Hedra is and what it does, just to set some context.
Yeah, so Hedra is a generative media platform. So we're both a product company and a research company. We train models that are natively omnimodal. That means they can operate jointly over image, text, and audio. And the goal is we're really trying to empower content creators from either prosumer people on TikTok, who you might have seen some of our viral content from, some are more like enterprise marketing agency clients, to really be able to bring together these tools and create content natively with AI. So we take this from like 2 approaches. One is like, how do we build models with net new capabilities? And I think you're going to see some really exciting stuff from us there soon. But also like, how do we fundamentally rethink the UX and UI around these products? I think as you've seen with like Claude Code versus like IDEs recently, I think oftentimes as the capabilities of these models increases, we actually need to rethink how we're actually building the core product experience. And that's something I spend a lot of time thinking about at Hedra.
Are you only using your own models, or are you also able to use other models?
Yeah, so we like allow you to use multiple different models. We have our own proprietary models, which are more popular, typically because they offer differentiated functionality and like are very cost effective due to our architecture. But we also let people use their same content library with like basically all the leading models, so that people don't feel like they have to hop around to multiple subscriptions, but they can stay within Hedra Studio.
Does that like walk me through the thinking on making your own models? I had this conversation with another kind of a Series B purely AI app, and he was very like, his strong opinion was like the vast majority of people that build their own models end up I think he referenced like Harvey or something like that, but you know, the vast majority of apps that build their own models end up just discarding them because, you know, the big foundational models, like they might not be as good as your model today for your app, but like they will get there and then they'll just destroy you. How do you think about that and the time you're investing there?
That's a good question. I think for language models, like we've kind of figured out like the general interface to language models, right? It's like text in, text out, not to be simplistic. And that just tends to work for most of the LLM use cases. And especially when you think about like where the LLMs are getting the most adoption, which is search and code generation. I think for visual media generation, it's quite different because a lot of times this is a much more creative pursuit, which is more about like there are many ways of communicating intentionality between you and a model. And I think that opens up like a lot more parameter space of like not only like how these models are designed, but also like how you can like communicate intentionality to them. So I think like LLMs are just like much more farther along and they have like a very well-defined like path, and it's really just about scaling them at this point and like, you know, working on reasoning, improving general intelligence. I think for like media generation, it's still too early for that. And like we're seeing things like fundamental architecture changes happening even now. So that's why I'd say like we're not in the stage where you can just build on top of a general purpose media generation model just yet.
Got you. And then just maybe for context, like if you for those who haven't seen Hedra, like pretty simple UI. I mean, you go in, you just type some stuff, you add in like an audio or text, you add in like maybe an image or a start frame or whatever, and it'll create a video for you kind of based on all that.
Yeah, that's how it works right now. And you can also we have like an audio studio product where you can make voice cloning using different partner voice models. We have like a whole image generation suite now. So really it's like about that core workflow of how do you bring together different content types and assemble them into something that you can like actually publish as a short form video.
What about, so here's an idea. I just tried to do this right now, right before our interview, and it wouldn't let me. I'm curious if this is something you would end up doing or not. Like, we do these long form podcasts where we record the video, but it's remote, and people don't love watching remote. So I was like, I would love to put in this audio and these videos and then have you make it so it looks like we're in the same room together chatting. Is that like something that could be done?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea and something that we're thinking about. Like, historically, we've worked a lot on like how do we have like good dialogue as part of a general purpose video model. And now a lot of what we're thinking about is how do we bring net new capabilities that are useful for this workflow that we've kind of grown to own, really around like, how do we make like really good podcasts? How can we make really good like marketing material? And I think a lot of that is making video models be able to more flexibly generate and edit at the same time. So I think like in the future version of Hedra, you could chuck some video in and some character references in and say, hey, like edit this podcast and get something out that felt really professional with very little work.
So let's now, we've kind of gone on a bit of a tangent just to set context, but like, yeah, tell me then about, let's go through a story like in as much detail as possible. I mean, you started this in 2023, so it's been like 2 years?
Yeah, about 2 years now.
What's your background? Like, how did you end up in the place where you started Hedra?
Yeah, so I was a PhD student with Fei Li and Jiajun Wu at Stanford, and I was in the last year of my PhD, and ChatGPT had come out like half a year or so, and there was just all this like excitement around like building applications and new technology in the space.
What was your PhD in? Like before that it popped?
I was in the computational neuroscience program, but most of my work was kind of in the sort of computer vision embodied AI realm. I had just like wrapped up a project. I had submitted my green light meeting to go do my defense. And then I told my advisors like, hey, like I want to take some time off immediately because like I feel like if I wait to do my defense in like 5 months, I'm going to miss this like big opportunity. And they're really receptive to that. And so originally I was going to go back. I was going to go set up the company, like build some stuff and then like go back. And then I just like ended up raising money and it just kind of led to the really getting locked in. And I'd been meaning to go back and like finish my defense now for like 2 years. But it's just hard when you like start a company. You just get so fixated on everything and like building and hiring that like thinking about going back and doing like a month for finishing my PhD is actually, seems like a lot of time.
Maybe if you don't mind going deeper on what you were doing and how you saw and what you saw, because I think that's obviously key. I mean, everybody knows what happens afterwards and kind of the success you've had so far. I mean, you raised a $30 million Series A a couple months ago from A16, but like, what exactly were you doing and what did you see in that ChatGPT moment that made you so decided to jump in?
Yeah, I think for me, it was realizing that like a lot of the clever approaches that we were doing in academia were ultimately like nothing in the face of scale. And that like if I wanted to build something impactful, I felt like I needed to do it in like an industry setting at that time. I mean, I think academia has like a lot of extremely valuable contributions still to be had, but a lot of like the core like productization of the work is really just about like, finding that like core consumer or enterprise need and like building a model that can like really serve that and then building that workflow around that model that will solve that use case. And I felt like, for me, I didn't have the like concrete idea or anything like when I dropped out. I just felt like there was something there and I took some time to like think about it and talk to people. And I kind of like came to this conclusion that like there existed the intersection of a lot of my interests and where I felt there was a gap in the market. Because I come from like a theater background. Like I grew up doing a lot of like acting, performance, and arts. But like I worked in computer vision and like I, was in this community of people that were also like very like, I don't know, startup minded, I'll say. Like Karan for Cartesia was kind of in my like sort of cohort, Demi from Pika. And so like I was really interested in this idea of like, there were these companies that were doing like avatars. And then there's companies that were doing like generative media, but like there wasn't this like, company I was thinking about like the intersection of them. Like how do we make these general purpose models that are really configurable around performance? And I just felt like that was like a core missing need in the market. Like I saw the rise of these like faceless TikTok channels. I saw how like, companies were doing like brand messaging testing and like re-recording the same video like 40 times. And I just saw something in there about like, could we make something that would automate all of this from both a platform and model perspective? And that was kind of like that core moment for me that like clicked. And it's like 2 years ago. So it was like, it took a really long time to like get there. And like,
2 years isn't that long, by the way. I mean, it's an amount of time.
It feels like a long time. Like it feels like a lifetime ago. Like I feel like I'm a totally different person now.
I mean, a lot's happened in those 2 years. That's legit.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because in some ways, like a lot of stuff has changed, but in some ways, a lot of stuff hasn't. Like I don't use ChatGPT anymore. I'm more of like a Gemini, Anthropic person, depending on what I'm doing. But like I opened up ChatGPT the other day and I'm like, oh, this like looks like I remembered it back in like 2022, but that's still like like one of the fastest growing products in the space, But on the other hand, now we have all these like really advanced application layer companies and the core models are just generally much more capable, but it just still feels like a long time. Just when you're going through like, we've been through 2 office moves. This is our New York office, which is kind of crazy. So now we have a second office. It just like, from when I was like in my apartment and like talking to like 3 other people to this, it just feels very different.
And so in the computer models you were building that you're saying like are not really like productizable, like what was an example of some of the things that you were working on in terms of computer vision?
So during my PhD, I did a lot of projects with like neural rendering towards the end, where I was like really interested in like explicit 3D representations. And I think like one thing that like I realized pretty early on is that like a lot of times these like really explicit things where like engineering hacks oftentimes will kind of get subsumed by the model. So like I think like 3D stuff is extremely interesting, especially for like the realm of gaming, but for like generative media, I think these like big models are just getting really good. And so that's like an example of like something that still like has a lot of interest in academia, but like I think for like certain use cases, these like large scale, diffusion models are just solving a lot of the problems.
So you were like hyper specializing on specific use cases, but you think that the generic ones are just going to solve that over time. That's kind of your idea there.
I think it's more that like there's certain technology that will get subsumed by models. So I think a lot about like agentic orchestration is like a good example. If you look at like a lot of products that have emerged, especially in like the AI coding space, I think we're seeing this like massive adoption of Claude Code right now. And Claude Code is like just like kind of this unified Claude plus tool use. And it turns out that's like enough when the model gets smart enough. And so that's more what I'm saying is that like there are still specialized models. Like, Claude is probably not as strong at like search and like being a companion as maybe Gemini or ChatGPT. But for like coding, building a unified model and like building a deep productization of that can be enough to just solve a huge class of problems.
So by the way, you mentioned this. I'm just like curious. Why'd you move from ChatGPT to Gemini? Any specific reason?
It's like one of those things where it's just Gemini 2.5 Pro is like really good. And like Google has really good search indexing and it's built into Google Workspace. So it's in email and Drive and like everywhere now. And I think like it's also very fast. And then for like general purpose, it's like I just have it in our Google Workspace subscriptions because we pay for this through the company. So I just use that for every like all my day-to-day questions. And then like I'm a huge like Claude for coding user. Like I think Claude Code is amazing. So that's like my primary work set. But now is like I use NeoVim and Claude Code together in the terminal. And that's kind of just like 95% of my AI use case now.
So going back to the storyline, you decide to drop out. Walk me through specifically like what you're doing, like day to day. What are you doing in that 5-month period?
Like the early, like pre-Hedra or like post actually founding the company?
Pre-Hedra, like when you're still like you dropped out, but you're figuring out like what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of talking to like people that I wanted to recruit. I was like, it's really hard to convince people to join you when you have no money. Like, I think people underestimate the difficulty because you're like, oh, you drop out of Stanford, and like, it's like just everything falls in place. It's not exactly like that. And so, but then like, I started I didn't know what a VC really was. Like, it's kind of embarrassing in retrospect, but I'm like, oh, what's venture versus growth equity? Like, who do I talk to? And so I just spent some time like building prototypes and like trying to convince people to like go on the journey with me. I did have a co-founder at the time. So like we were trying to put together some things.
And you're building a prototype of what? Like, what is this thing that you're trying to solve for at that point, right? Versus what it is today.
Yeah, it was originally trying to build like essentially like a compositional avatar plus scene rendering engine. So it was like less like pure end-to-end model based, more kind of compositional rendering.
So like you put some text, you get an avatar, and they do something. That's
more like
kinda
you have to like take a video and you get like that video gets turned into something that's like a representation of that video. So it was more like assembly than like pure generation. We made a really cool prototype. And well, I made a cool prototype.
Was this, by the way, sorry, I mean, was this pre-Sora, like the Sora video they put out and all this stuff?
Yeah, this was pre-Sora.
Okay. Okay.
This is like 2023 at the time.
Right. Yeah. Right after ChatGPT came out. Okay.
And yeah, like we ended up like, you know, raising money, getting the seed round done. Cause like there were some investors that were really interested in space. I really connected with Index at the time. Then it was kind of more about just like,
how much was the seed round?
We raised 7 for our seed round originally.
That's a big one. I mean, obviously in the world of AI, it's happening a lot, but what's the story there? Like, how did that actually come about?
Yeah. Like I'd been like thinking on these ideas. I had kind of a concrete vision at that point, pretty similar to our vision now, like maybe like, you know, much less mature. I didn't really understand customer profiles, like how focused you had to be if you were trying to do like enterprise versus like doing something that's just purely prosumer. But like, I think like the core idea of like really, you know, building content creation workflows around these models, giving people more long form video controllability, having like, you know, people at the center of a lot of the video was there. And then I had like kind of people had figured out that I was doing something because I just have a lot of friends that would like get approached by investors and then they'd be like, oh, you should talk to my friend Michael who's like building something in the space. And then we got scouted by a couple funds. And then like I had gotten connected to a couple funds through mutual friends from Stanford or through my broader network. And then that kind of led me to like meeting with a bunch of people and getting a lot of investor interest. And then I really connected with Kat Wu, who was at Index, who's now coincidentally one of the leads of Claude Code. I think you may have seen like they got poached by Cursor and then they just went back to Anthropic recently, and she really sold me on like Index and working together with her, and that kind of was like what led us to kick off with them. And then Abstract and A16Z had participated in the seed round as well.
When you raised that seed round, was it just you, or what was the team like?
Yeah, it was like me and my co-founder at the time, and then like a couple other engineers who joined early. So Terrence is like our employee number 1, and he's still at the company, like our oldest employee. So
you raised the seed round, like what's the thing that you're focused on doing, like focused on building first?
Yeah, so I had like I had wanted to get something out to market. So we were trying to build on this like product idea that I originally had, like this technological approach. And so we spent a few months working on that. And at the time I was also trying to recruit. I didn't really get how to recruit for a startup. I know it sounds kind of weird, but like you ping all your friends in your network and that's how you get some people, oftentimes the best people. But I didn't understand like what working with a recruiter was like. I didn't know what like an ATS was. I didn't understand like an interview loop. It was very vibes based early on and like quite messy.
Is that good though? That's potentially a good thing, no?
I think it's good, can be good and bad, because I think like oftentimes when you're building a startup, you want to have like really small time to market. But also you kind of want to lay the foundations that when you get to market, you're not building on like shaky terrain. So like a lot of our early system was like super unstable, like very crashy. And I think had we brought in like really experienced like staff level engineers to like anchor the team, I think probably it would have been like easier to scale. And that wasn't something that like I really appreciated, especially because like I was like a researcher by trade. I'd never run an engineering team before. Yeah, I think like definitely in retrospect, like one thing I'd say is like people should consider bringing on a talent person if you're venture backed really early on. We just hired like the most amazing head of talent in the Valley, Camille, who just joined us from Niantic. And like I can't tell you how much better that's made my life.
How many, but like with that 7 million, how many people did you want to get to? How many people did you hire?
I think it's good to get to like a team of 10, I'd say, on that sort of budget. I think in general, like when I think about ideal composition of early stage teams, I think you should have one person, ideally the founder, who has like the product vision and roadmap. You want one person who's like really anchoring like the engineering side. If you're doing research, you want one person who's really anchoring the research side. So that could be like a head of engineering and a head of research. Those people should still be really hands-on though. Like you can't have hands-off people in an early stage startup. It just does not work. And then like you would really want like a few like, a solid full stack engineer or two, a solid platform backend engineer, ideally like couple staff level people. And then I'd say you need one designer, and then you should bring a talent person early on, is my opinion. Because you just spend so much time thinking about talent and like making sure you're running a clean process and you're getting the best people. It can really become like it is a full-time job, even at the early stage. And I think when I think about like what I spent my time thinking about really early on, I wasn't spending my time always thinking about product. I was spending a lot of time thinking about like operations and hiring. And I think had I figured out how to accelerate that earlier, we would probably be where we are in like at least half the time.
So 1 year instead of 2 years. I mean, you're going fast, by the way. Just historically speaking. But I get what you're saying. I guess here's a question for you. Like, well, how do these people that are joining you early, these first 10? I mean, you are funded. There's some credibility, but are they leaving something to join you, or were they kind of like just recent graduate from a PhD or something? Like, what was the profile of most of these people?
I think a lot of the people were like pretty fresh early on. I think that's what you tend to get because oftentimes, even with like a large seed round, it can be difficult to convince people to leave like a stable job, right? Like a Scale or like a Databricks, like one of these like more like established, like very late stage startups. And oftentimes I think the people that are best for like setting up a seed stage company are the people that did like a Series A to like Series C stint where they've like seen like completely greenfielded systems. They know how to like spin up things from scratch. But like they also like ideally have worked with like a high growth team. So they like know what the hours are like, they know how to build a company culture, which is also something I didn't think a lot about when I first started the company. And now I spend a lot of time thinking about. Yeah, I think a lot of the people early on were fresh. And like now when you look at our team, like most of the people we're hiring are from like really like later stage, high growth, like well-known startups, who like were ideally there at the beginning or pretty early, but have that like are basically like two timers.
And so those first 10 people, are you focusing more on UI product, or are you building like foundational model things? Like what are you spending your time on with that seed round?
Yeah, I think I spent more time on like the core model work at first. And in retrospect, like honestly, I think you should probably I would not recommend most companies like go out and start a new model program. Like I think there's just too many opportunities at the like application layer right now. But like I think for a research company,
But back then, even 2 years ago, that was probably different, right? Or are you saying you would have done things differently?
I think 2 years ago it was different. I think like now it's definitely very different because like I think in 6 months the capabilities of these models are going to be good enough for like most of the use cases that you'll need, and like a lot of it is going to be, can you build vertical specific workflows that like solve like specific pain points people have? Because not everyone just wants to go into like a generic chat assistant. Like there's a lot of work that could be done there. I do think there's some risk because it seems like OpenAI and like Anthropic especially are like pushing out of just being model providers into being vertical providers. Like I don't know if you saw, I mean, between Claude Code is like growing massively and is like, I think disrupting some of the like IDE products. I think also there's like the Anthropic's financial product they just launched, which is more focused on like, that like Rogo Hebia kind of market. And so but I think there's things that the foundation model labs can't do because they can't do everything. And to me, that's like the area to focus if you're building like a new company.
Almost seems like this is a bit of a tangent, but like from a value capture perspective, like the foundational model layer on its own is not actually the big prize. Like ChatGPT is like consumer app, like you're saying, you know what I mean? Anthropic is more on the development piece, start on finance, but like there's actually more value to be captured if you have the best models by going vertically integrated and owning space versus just like being a model layer. I mean, I guess that's one read of the situation.
I think that's true because I think you can also optimize the model for like a specific use case, right? Like you can like train it to do really good agentic tool use. You can build out the UI where you can directly access parts of the model. And I think like the frontier labs have like realized this. And so it's like why they're doubling down on all these products. Like I think OpenAI is launching something today, maybe the browser. at the time, I just like hired out people mostly focused on model. And like what I realized is you need to productionize it, and you need to like solve specific need for people. And I think that really involves getting at least like one really good product designer in early. You being a really like the founder needs to be that product manager that like understands the market pain point and like can translate that into specs for the designer. And then like, really strong design oriented engineers who know how to build something that's performance stable and beautiful. Regardless of what sector, I think everyone wants to use software they love.
I guess that's the key question, right? To dive into, like, as you realize that, like, okay, you've got to productize, you've got to find something you solve. Like at the end of the day, you need to find a problem that you're going to solve. Like regardless of everything else that you're doing, what is the first thing that you're going after? What's the first kind of like use case, or even thinking about it that way at that stage?
Like, and specifically to Hedra, what I realized is that there was pretty good synergy between like people who are pro content creators and people who are marketers, and that a lot of that content involved dialogue-centric scenes. So building like a good workflow that let people do this generated video, but also let them like put their message into it and do it in like a fast, easy way was what our first wedge was. And so for me,
it's like short form video for like Reels, TikTok, etc. Like, is this kind of what you're going after?
Yeah, like I think for me, I thought my theory was there were a couple for things like basically this faceless talking channel trend. Like there's a lot of people that create like tutorials or like product reviews or like sell a product on TikTok. That's like a pretty good fraction of people who like make money off of TikTok.
That's like easier, right? Like in terms of an AI gen problem to do those than a truly avatar like human like experience.
No, I think they're like pretty comparable. Like we thought we wanted to make the model like so it was flexible, so you wouldn't have to think, do I use Hedra or do I use this other thing? It was just like, oh, use Hedra. Because if you add cognitive overhead, right, it kind of ruins the magic of AI. It's like if I had to go and be like, oh, do I use OpenAI or like Anthropic for this? It does kind of make it like a little bit more annoying, and so you kind of just want something that does it all. So for us, it was like, okay, there's gonna be these like faceless channels. People are gonna make UGC content. Podcasting, I was like, I feel like this is going to be a thing. And like, that was, I think, a pretty good read because it ended up being like a decent chunk of our revenue. And then I was like, okay, you really want to find a product or like a market where there's like people that are using you casually, but then there's like a professional upsell version of that. And the nice part about like these like, social media is social marketing is huge and growing. And like podcasting is like something that companies now do to like promote their own like interests, right? Or like give product reviews. I think OpenAI has a podcast. And so that was kind of like my plan is like we wanted to have this PLG prosumer popular platform that solved a lot of the cognitive overhead of creating this type of content. But then like have a clear like enterprise use case for like, company communications and marketing. And that was like the vision behind like the Hedra product, which I think like panned out.
What's the main podcast use case? How are people using it?
I mean, John Mahua has like a really popular channel where he generates like a lot of like podcast content. It was like, he did this one between like, like a Jesus podcast was I think the first one that was really viral around Easter. And then he did this like baby podcast series.
Yeah, the baby ones, right?
Yeah, now he's doing like another one. He's doing like robots. That's like probably the most like views popular channel because those get like hundreds of millions of views.
Wow.
I think, but we have channels that are now just like more casual, like people just talking about like the news or like what's going on, right? Or like creating like virtual influencers.
And it's all avatars, so like they'll create the script or whatever, the audio, but then the idea is like it's just two avatars talking to each other, like two AI generated.
Yeah, I mean you can do anything in Hedra. Like you can make talking animals, babies. You can do general purpose video, so you can do your B-roll. Like if you want to have a car shot or like moving backgrounds, waves, whatever. But I think that's what people like us is that they can kind of just get everything they need. So they don't have to like use a bunch of different tools.
I'm really worried because listen, like you've been listening for like what, 10, 20, 30 minutes now. Clearly you like it. And the thing is, the next episode is way better and you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it because you're not following the show. So take your phone out and hit that follow button. But so the main use case like for Hedra on the podcast side is people who are like creating new podcasts through Hedra versus like augmenting what they're already doing for the most part, or both?
Yeah, I think right now that's more of like a bandwidth of our team distinction rather than something we've intentionally done. Because like a lot of the value of Hedra historically has been like creating net new content But like we think there's a lot of potential in AI also just changing how we like edit and interact with existing content. So we're obviously working on a lot of stuff in the background now that we have all this additional capital. And like thinking about like ways that these models can operate on existing videos definitely close to top of mind.
Like here's a way to make this tangible. Like, how could I use Hedra today? Like, is there a use case for me and PMF show with Hedra today? Like, what do you think it would be?
Well, if you want to, for example, make like a daily reaction video where you go over like tech news, it's pretty easy to set up an automation with Hedra where you can pull with like, pull from the X API what's going on, write your script, deploy like a video with you and another host, and it could just be a generated version of you, right? A lot of people do when they do themselves animated versions because it seems less deceptive to people. Like, when you do a real person, there's definitely a lot of use cases for that. But usually if you represent yourself, having like, a fun 3D animated style or an anime style is a good way of like making it clear that it's generated content. And it seems like that's something that people don't have the same aversion to. Actually, people think it's fun.
I like that actually. What's the max length on a video right now?
Technically 5 minutes, but it's unlimited. We just haven't gotten requests for more than 5 minutes, really. Because 5 minutes covers like most podcasts when you do like shot, reverse shot, or side by side. But yeah, one of the advantages of our technology and our architecture is our models support infinite recursion. So we don't have an issue with long video generation like other providers.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because I wonder, like, just the animated piece that you said, like I was telling you, right? Like, I mean, we're doing this remotely. I record all my stuff remotely, but like, if I could regenerate this, and it's like us two, but we're animated versions of ourselves talking like in a studio, visually, that's just probably better. But I mean, it's an hour-long podcast, so I don't know if I'd let tomorrow, but that'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think like, and we have people that are doing that now because like, a lot of people want to create like localized content or like local, like, a big tragedy, like not to get on my soapbox, but is that local news is like been very hard to maintain in the era of like consolidation in media. And so we have people now that create like local news channels with like anchors generated with Hedra, which I think is kind of cool because, news and civic engagement is so important, right? And I think like that's like the power of generative media is like stuff that like maybe because of economic incentives or consolidation has gone away can now come back because it's just so cheap to make this content now. So I think that's like a really interesting use case that we've seen pop up.
And then tell me about like, when did you actually officially launch?
We launched the first version of our platform last June. It was like a very different UI. You can actually still see it if you know the right URL. Because we still have like pretty loyal users that really like the old app and the old model.
What was the difference? I mean, now it's basically a text box and like add script, add frame sort of thing. Like, what was the old UI?
Yeah, so the new UI is like very like Figma-y. Like it has different modes and like you can switch models and you can bring content from one mode to the other. The old UI was very much like a avatar only generator where it was like our model and like it was just the avatar and there was like script always exposed. So it was much more fit to like one type of video. And in some ways that was really nice because it made the product very focused, but it meant that we were more of like a point solution rather than a workflow tool. And so people would always talk about like, hey, I use Hedra with X, Hedra with Y. And we'd be like, oh, why did you do that? Like, we have a really good image model. Like, you can just use that. And they're like, oh, but it's in the avatar box, right? So it just doesn't make sense. So a lot of the motivation behind our B2 launch, which was like 4 months ago now, was on how can we bring this together in a way where people have the tools they need to make this type of content, but it feel more like a workflow that you can kind of live in, where you can just like use Hedra for all your needs rather than using Hedra as just a point solution. And I think that's like a lot of the reason why we saw this big inflection point when we launched is like we kind of became one of these go-to tools. And that's like a really also informing like what I'm thinking about for what we're building next.
Walk me through the first launch and the second launch, but let's start with the first one. Like, so June 2024, how do you launch the product?
Yeah, I mean, it really came together like very last minute. So we had pivoted off of the tech approach and we kind of been building this new model. And like Suno had come out at the time, like pretty like it soon been out, but it was like trending. And I like Also, one thing to put in context is there wasn't really dialogue in generative video at this point. Like there kind of was, but it's just really bad. Like it was so bad, it was like borderline unusable. And so one thing I'd done is I had
So
like
the
seen this
generative
model.
video was no audio. Is that what you're saying? Like people were
Yeah,
talking?
like there was like lip sync on top of existing video, but it was like 3 seconds. It wasn't very like the face wasn't coordinated. Like it just wasn't like what you needed. And so we had this model that we were developing, and like we didn't have like a UI or anything. And I was playing around with Suno. And I was like just making really funny songs. Like that's like 90% of my generative music use case is making like comedy songs. And so I had this like hilarious song that was like someone had made that was trending at the time, and I like chucked it into our model with a picture, and I was like, wow, it can like sing. Like that's actually pretty fun. Like someone's gonna want to use this. And then so I made the call that we should like just really rapidly productionize like a simple version of this and get it out there. And so we kind of like scrambled to put together like a basic web UI, get the model deployed, and it was like maybe like a month and a half like sprint. And we were also like making the model better because like we had shown like our investors the model, like the really early version of the model, and I think the response was like, "Oh, it looks okay, it's cool, but it's like not there yet." And then like I was like, "All right, so let's like parallel track getting the model good and like getting the product ready, and those hopefully will come together at the same time." And that was like really like you know how it is at startups. Those were like super late nights. People were like really grinding, and I think when we gotten that first UI, like I lost like 2 hours just playing around with it, like making stuff. And I was like, all right, I think people are going to like this. So then I was like, oh, but like, how do we like launch? How do you actually do a launch? Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, you get people to retweet it, right? Like that's the thing. And so I went about trying to figure out, like, I asked one of our angel investors, like, hey, can you introduce me to some like influencers you think are interested in the space? And I took a 4-day sprint of basically doing 10 hours a day onboarding influencers onto the platform, which is really annoying at the time because we had no like feature flags, nothing. It was just like very much like manually adding people into a database and like teaching them how to use the tool, and then being like, hey, we're gonna launch at this time, like make some content, right? And we didn't pay them or anything.
What
It
was the
just, like,
feedback, by the way? What were like as people were using it, those early ones? Like, what were they saying to you?
I think people were like really excited because they were like, wow, this is like kind of like something that we needed. Like it wasn't like putting dialogue in video allowed people to tell stories. Like that was really important. Like people were like, oh, I could like automate my channel with this. Like I could like make a movie with this. And so people are finding like more use cases than we anticipated. And so, you know, we launch and like the launch was pretty successful. Like we made like hype videos. Like hype videos. I just gave our interview to Business Insider about this. They're really like hard to make. You need to find someone that's good. So I like texted one of my friends and I was like, hey, like who's the best hype video person that can make this video? And we put it together in like a 24-hour turnaround. And I think we got into getting like 200,000-300,000 impressions on it, which is like fine. Nothing compared to like what we do now. But like
did you use Hedra to make these hype videos?
we did. Like we generated the content in Hedra for the hype video. And then yeah, it was that plus like, you know, all the influencers talking about us, plus like a couple like news websites picked us up. And that really led to like an explosion of growth. At the time we had no monetization because like we didn't have enough time to like put monetization in. Which sucks in retrospect. We could have made like so much money. At the time, like, you know, we were just trying to get this out there to be first, to get mind share.
How many users do you get like in that first month, for example? Like order of magnitude.
Like million or something.
Wow.
I want to say, or like I honestly forget at this point.
But we're talking those numbers. We're not talking 10,000 or 100K. Like we're talking a million-ish.
No, it was a lot of users, but it was a lot of free users. And I think I've talked about this, but free users are often like they're often negative signal, in my opinion. The people who are willing to pay for software are sometimes a totally different group than the people who are willing to use it for free. And so like, you know, we basically were like, all right, like this is a thing. Let's add like a bunch of features and like monetization. And honestly, that was a mistake. we had something that was popular, but instead of me taking the time to like think about why it was popular, I was like, let's just add functionality to it. And I think I could
Functionality
have
that
just
people requested, or just functionality you assumed would be the right stuff?
functionality people requested and functionality that people thought would be the right stuff. But like I think my problem is I hadn't like identified like that core high willingness to pay ICP of the pool of users that were requesting
Who
stuff.
are you solving a problem for versus just, oh, the people here asked for this, so I'll do it?
Yeah, exactly. And we were like relatively data driven. Like we used a stack ranking, like issue report system. So it's not like we were just like flying blind, but I still like didn't think like I did like the bottoms up thinking, but I didn't do the tops down thinking of like what problem is this solving? Like we got something out that was solving a problem area, but we didn't get something out that was solving like a full workflow. And that was like, I think a false signal to me. And like we did get monetization on it. It was still like really successful. Like we grew to $1 million in revenue relatively quickly,
How fast?
like a few months, 5 months, 6 months
Nice.
or something. I think for me, ultimately, like I just felt like there was something missing. Like it didn't feel like that vision I had in my head of that, like, solving this like pro content marketing, content creation problem. And
From a
so
product perspective, you didn't feel satisfied, or did you see something in the usage or the growth patterns too?
all of it, right? Like I looked at all of it. I interviewed hundreds of people. I did all of our customer support. Like I just was looking at it and I just felt like there was something missing. I think it was like, I went and I did sales meetings and I'd be like, oh, where is this, this, and this? And like I would talk to our users and see them using other tools with us. And I'd look at like our model and I felt like our model wasn't able to do all the content people wanted it to do. And it just felt like, honestly, it's really overwhelming, right? Like when you get all that feedback. I think like at that time, I kind of made this, there was something that like snapped in me where I was like, made this call that like, we fundamentally have to build like a V2. Like we need to change everything. I had like I think I had a very clear vision of like what that V2 was, that would get us to like our next milestone. And that we kind of just went heads down and worked on for like.
Was there a catalyst that drove you to that certainty that you had to build V2, or was it like after so many things you don't know what it was, but the whole of it just gave you that confidence?
Sometimes I just feel like you have to have gut intuitions and go with it when startups. Like I think a lot of it, it's like, I think there is a lot of data, right? But sometimes you just have to have like a vision and conviction and like get people's alignment around that. And I think for me, part of it was like thinking about us. Like I just felt like being like fundamentally just like a image to avatar workflow without anything else just was not, it wasn't solving like a fundamental need. It was solving like a technology need. And I think what I wanted to do was I felt like there was like an insurmountable gap between solving the technology need and the workflow need without me just like doing a lot more work. Does that make sense?
And I think it does. Like, what was the workflow need that you then decided? Because as you mentioned before, you hadn't done that top down. So I'm assuming that you kind of did that top down thinking. What was the workflow need that then you landed on at that point?
Yeah, like I felt like what people really wanted is they wanted like the ability to have like, a common asset management layer, be able to like bring in all this different type of media, be able to like generate like the, core image, audio, video workflow, being able to have access like different models, not just our model, being able to like kind of grow to trust Hedra as being like that, like, Figma like experience where you can bring in like build all the stuff you need. And that's really what I wanted to get to. And I really wanted to like narrow in on this like prosumer marketer profile. And that's like what I communicate. Like I brought in like a bunch of designers. We have an amazing design team now. We kind of like did a whole revamp. We tried to build, one mistake I made, which I'll admit, is like we tried to build while designing, which can be quite challenging. Like if you don't get everyone alignment and buy-in on what like an MVP looks like, I think sometimes, it can cause a lot of like burnout in engineers if they're like building something and then you're like, hey, like actually, no, we're changing this, or like, actually, this isn't the MVP because there's this thing that's missing. And like, that was like very hard because, we were training a new model. We were trying to design this, we were building, and the engineers were being given like moving goalposts on like what was the MVP for the launch. So it was
And
really
you're still
messy.
like 10 people or so at the time?
Yeah, like we were still pretty small. So a lot was like falling on like a few people.
How do you get like the alignment once you decide you want to do this G2, like the rest of the team and even the investors, was that relatively easy?
I think like I think our investors like were very happy with like what I had done because like with relatively little resources, like 7 million is not like a little, but like Sora had come out at this point and we were still like people were really excited to use Hedra, so we had stood out and like we did something other people weren't doing. And I think like Pete, that earned, I think I've like built a really solid rapport with all of our investors and I love everyone that we work with. And I think like the fact that we had done something unique and that we were like, I had this vision for doing something unique again. And I think that like really brought a lot of people in. Team wise, it wasn't always like that. I did have a co-founder and my co-founder left kind of in that interim period. We just agreed like, he wanted to pursue other things. Like he's really successful now working in robotics space. And I really wanted to just keep pursuing this vision.
I don't know how much you can share, but I mean, co-founder disputes are like very seldom talked about for obvious reasons. So even if you can't give like the why it happened, even just the fallout and the outcome of all that, like the more you can share, the better on the stuff around it, the stuff that's not proprietary.
I think people should talk about it more. I think people should talk about they should talk about like when co-founders like stop working together. They should talk about like what it's like to fire your first employee because this honestly happens to like most people. And like if people don't talk about it, like it's just it's gonna mean that you're not like equipped to deal with it when it happens to you, right? My co-founder and I are still friends. Like we're on good terms. Like we talk. Like I think we just want different things from the company. Like I really had this vision of pursuing what became Hedra Studio, and he wanted to go work on robotics. And like I think if a person's heart isn't in the direction the company is going, they shouldn't be there, right? And we didn't. I think it's not like I don't have any like really juicy stories here. It was just like
no. I mean, I guess my question is more like why, like maybe just a baseline question, like. If you want to do robotics, I mean, this is never going to be robotics. Why do you think he even started it with you in the first place?
Yeah, I think that what happened, is that like when we started out the company, like we had a vision and we thought that that what we were going to build earlier was probably going to be what we kind of built later, if that makes sense. And like there was a period where it maybe felt really far away to getting to what like became Hedra Studio, and like Character 3. And so like I think in that time period, if you're just not like if you don't see that and you're not really excited about that and you don't feel like that's gonna happen, like there are other opportunities, right?
And then what was the fallout in your startup when that happens? Like was it kind of, I mean, it's usually a big deal. Like did it impact other things or was it smooth?
Oh yeah, I mean like this was it was definitely a big deal at the time, right? And like I think I like talked through it with the team and like some people left, right? Like some people did leave. And then I kind of just like rebuilt the team. I brought more people in, and like I kind of just had to align people. And it is a lot of faith to like believe a founder when they're like, "Hey, I think this thing is going to be really successful. Just like stick with me, and like we'll make it happen." Right?
What about yourself? Like emotionally, were you fine?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been like, I think one of the biggest like things about being a founder is just having that like emotional resilience and grit. Like you just have to be able to get through anything, right? And I think that like for me, I like a lot, like I did do like a lot of inward reflection, right? And I like, you always have these like crisis of faith, which is like, is this going to work? Like, and you just have to push through that, right? Like you just have to be like, you have to figure it out, right? Like it's not, is this model going to work? It's like, how are we going to make this model work? It's not like, is this product going to resonate with people? It's like figure out what to make it resonate with people and who your ICP is and just be able to recite that in your sleep and know that person really, really well. And I think what happened is I just became like really fired up to like make it work, whatever the cost to myself was. And I just tried to get everyone in alignment on that. And I'm really like fortunate that it like worked out as well as it did. But like there's a world in which like I wasn't able to do that, right? But yeah, so that was like kind of like the pre-Series A, like pre-Hedra Studio time was like we launched a product, like we monetized, we got some pretty good revenue, not like rocket ship revenue, and then like went through a team change and then like locked in and had to go build to our next milestone.
And are you kind of flatlining on revenue as you're built? Because you've got so many things going. You've got co-founder leaving, you're building model, you're rebuilding V2, designing, all this stuff. Are you still growing during that time, or you kind of like plateaued?
We're still growing, but we weren't growing at like the rate that we were because we stopped shipping new features. So like that was like the kind of hard call I had to make, is I had to say like it's worth sacrificing a little bit of growth now to build something that's going to grow a lot more in the future. And like, you know, that's like oftentimes like a really controversial decision, right? Like, and I think
it is. I think it's
mean,
very controversial, especially I would say like, you know, at the outset, you're like, this is what we're going to do. If you were like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then you go a few months, not really growing. And all of a sudden it's like, yo, are we sure about that?
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
what I mean?
exactly.
I like the way we're
and then
growing.
like people, you know, if you're looking at something like a next version of the product is like totally broken, you're like, oh my God, like this product we had that's working is languishing, and this thing that's super broken is like, when is it even gonna launch, right? But like ultimately, like I think you kind of you have to do that, because I think one of the traps that people get in is when something works but it doesn't work well enough, right? That like, you know, one person once told me like, if you are asking whether or not you have product market fit, you don't have product market fit, right?
That's right.
And so for me, I was like, all right, we don't have product market fit, right? Because I'm asking the question. And so that's like what like made me do that like deep reflection and deep like, you know, reanalysis of the product, building out that version 2, building out that next model. Like just because I was like, we need to build to the next milestone.
And so what was the second launch like? What did you do for that one?
That was a lot more organized, because at the time, you know, we brought in our first like product marketing hire, and she's awesome. She's definitely taken a lot off my plate in terms of like, you know, putting together the video and coordination. I still am like very deeply involved. But it was like pretty high stakes, right? Because we hadn't done a launch in a while. It was the first thing that we put out. It was a totally new platform, right? Basically built from the ground up. Same
And did
core
you have a long
functionality.
runway at the time, or were you? What did cash look like?
I have flexed up burn a lot to be able to afford the trial, the product. Had the launch not gone well, we would have had like, I think 6 months of or more than that.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually.
Okay. So there's a lot on the line. Is the setup?
Yeah, it was like the company would have been fine. Like we would have like our burn would have come down from the training costs of the model, and like, you know, it would have been longer, but like it was still like, you know, pretty much like we should make this an impactful launch, because it would be bad if we did not make it an impactful launch. So, you know, we put people on the model. People got really excited because it was another like step function. It was a much bigger change of capabilities than people were expecting us to be able to do. And it was like the first model of its kind. The studio product was like much more full featured. The UI was really clean. It was still pretty janky, it turned out, because it turns out when you scale to millions of users, like things break. Who knew? Yeah, so we put that out, and we got like, you know, really quickly like mass virality. And I think not only that, like huge amounts of like company inbound in the day after we like launched.
Was it similar though, like the influencer strategy?
We didn't. I think like one difference of us is we haven't really done as much like paid influencer partnerships. Like a lot of these viral videos you see on X, like there's a playbook to doing it. Like there's like a couple hundred influencers you hit up and you pay some money and they like retweet your thing. And we didn't really do that for our first launch, and we didn't do it for that launch. We really just like, I mean, maybe like I don't actually know exactly like all the people we talked to. Maybe some of them like we paid to like try out the software, but like in general, our position has been like, you know, just make something good and then like put people on it, and they should talk about it if it's good, and if it's not good, don't launch it. Yeah, we did the same thing where we like put people on it early and gave them early access and let them make content, and that did really well.
And what was the, like, so you said, you know, the first one, you got like 1 million users, 1 million ARR within like 5 months. What was the outcome of this V2?
It was a lot. So we pretty quickly hit like an 8-figure run rate, which was exciting.
Wow. That's awesome.
That's been really exciting too, is also seeing like the enterprise adoption. Like, you know, I think we sign like an enterprise contract every couple of days now. Like pretty big ones now too. And so, and that's without outbound sales. Like that's the other crazy thing is we haven't really built it. Like people are like, oh, what's your go-to-market team? And I'm like, But now it's a little bit different because we're building out, like, you're hiring our first AEs, we're hiring like more product marketing.
How many people are you today?
We're like 23, I think, as of this week. So we're still pretty small. But we generally like have tried to keep the team lean. And now we're thinking a lot about, like, as we scale and we get ready for like our next launches, like, what does the team structure look like, and how do we start building an org that can scale? Because, like, I've historically been like a really hands-on founder, and I think we want to keep that, but also now, like, I can't do first round screener calls for a lot of candidates anymore because there's too many people that are applying. So we have a head of talent now, and, like, I can't review all the copy that goes into the website for everything. So that's why we're bringing on product marketing leader. And same with, like, for go to market, like, I can't do every sales call. There are just too many calls now. So that's where we're hiring out AEs. And that, like, has definitely been a transition going from like a series, like a C company to like a series A and now beyond kind of company. Is like, how do I like scale my time and still make sure that like the org maintains excellence? And fortunately we just hired out like amazing people, and like I often will wake up and like work that I was worried about doing the next day is just done. And that's kind of a crazy, nice feeling.
How did the Series A come about?
Yeah. So, we've worked with A16Z for a long time, like since our seed round. And like, I think one of the differences about A16Z from a lot of other funds is just like how big the support infrastructure is for founders. What I'll say is, like, they're not going to build your business for you, right? They're not going to fundamentally like replace your role as a founder, but it's kind of like, just, you have access to so many resources between like the talent team, the go-to-market team, just crazy opportunities if you know where to look and ask. And A16Z is just there to make you succeed. We've had like a really good relationship with them. They were there for us through like the whole process. I think like after they saw like the model and like the launch, because I only told them about it like a couple days before because I wasn't sure if it was going to work. They saw the initial early traction, and we chatted and we're like, how do we figure out a way to continue this partnership, so that we could just get back to building. So I didn't really go out and try to raise money from anyone else. We just kind of came to an agreement with our existing investors. And I've wanted to work with Matt for a really long time, Bornstein, who's on our board. He's like he's one of my favorite investors I've ever met. He just like really understands deeply AI. Like, he's been doing AI investing even before it was hypey, and just like totally understands like the different value propositions and positions of companies and like the core technology differentiation. And then Martin Casado, the GP, and like Justine Moore, have just been like such amazing resources from the A16Z infra team, even before like they led our Series A. So it just was like, it was always like what I wanted, and like it would just happen to be the business got to the point where like it made sense to do a Series A. And that was actually pretty early. Like, I think our revenue had only tripled at that point. It was just really exciting to see everything come together.
Perfect, man. Well, listen, let's stop there. I'll ask the last few questions that we always end on. The first one is, you mentioned with V1, you were like not sure that you had product market fit, which means you didn't have product market fit. What about now? Like, when did you first feel like you had true product market fit?
I mean, the first couple days after launch, like, we definitely got really impressive numbers. Like, it was like, wow, like, this is like so much more money. And then I was like, all right, this could be like novelty. Like, people could just be checking it out. Like, what's retention going to look like? And then, it was like month one, and I'm like, okay, that was cool. Like, people are retaining. But like, maybe it's still just a fad. Like, other models are going to come out. And then it was like month two, and then I'm like, all right, okay, the numbers keep going up. This is great. Maybe we have product market fit. And I kept like just having this like natural skepticism because of like, all right, like, there's going to be another shoe dropping, right? And I think that it was kind of like, I kept like wanting to like find a reason why there was like a problem with things, and the business kept doing better. And so that was really exciting and validating, because I had gone through this kind of like dark period a little bit, like where I was like questioning myself last year between these big launches. So I think it was probably like month 2 or 3, like after launch, where I was like, okay, I think we've like solved a core need. And now it's like about, it's not that we're not going to do big, crazy like things again, but we just have something that works now. And that just makes so many things easier, like everything from like recruiting to like fundraising to like, think like how you're thinking, talking to like people on the team about what the positioning of the company is. And I think that's just done like, it's just made like building a high growth company really easy. So yeah, I think it was probably like month 2 after launch.
And then you've touched on this a little bit, but like, what's one moment you remember specifically where you thought things might not work out? Like things might just fail.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a couple times. So right before I raised our first round, I had no idea for a term sheet, right? Like I mean, you're a PhD student, you've never built anything like beyond papers in your life. Asking people to trust you with like $7 million to go build something, like feels like a lot. I know there's like a survivorship bias because you see these people raise money, but like there's so many people who don't raise money, that, I was like, I could just not make any money and like go back to school and then I could, go live a really successful life doing research like Google or Nvidia. But like, I feel like I missed out on this opportunity to build something. So that was one time. I think like, kind of in this, like after the first, actually, I would say there was like, the time when we did the first pivot, I felt like, when we had to like kind of redo our whole tech stack and like that felt to me like, oh, I just wasted so much time. Like, I wish I just had this idea earlier. Like, I wish I'd bet on this approach before. And that made me feel like a really bad founder, like, which in retrospect, like you talk to so many people and you realize this happens like to every single person. And people tell you this, like it's not like people don't admit this. They're like, oh yeah, we pivoted so many times, and you hear that, and then when you do it, you still feel bad, right?
Yeah, 'cause I think you just put
like,
so much weight on your shoulders as a founder. It's almost inevitable.
yeah, because and that's like honestly, it's good, it's important. Everything is on you, right? But at the same time, like, I think admitting like when you're wrong, or like not even when you're wrong, but like when you didn't predict something, it's just so hard to always predict something, and there's a lot of luck and timing involved, that you have to like just roll with the punches and like do what the best thing is for the company at any given time. Doing that, like going that first sort of like technology pivot, and like making the bet on like the first version of Hedra was definitely a time. And I think like in that like time between like the first launch and building out these features, and realize that we needed to do like deeper product and model rework to really like reach that next milestone. As well as, like when my co-founder left, that was like another time where I was like, okay, like I have to go embark on this like really big quest, and I think there's going to be a huge payoff at the end of the road, but it still seems really far away. And I think like what I'd say to like, people listening to this, other founders, is like, you just have to get to that next thing, right? You just have to have that faith. You have to like think really hard if it's the right thing, right? Like, don't just have blind faith without like conviction that you've got through like research and deep understanding of your ICP and of your product and of the market. But when you have that, like, people are going to look to you, right, to be inspired, to be able to go along with you. And if you're like outwardly like questioning, if you're outwardly like not having that like strength to like bring people along with you, it's hard to like push through those times. And I'm just like really thankful that I had like amazing investors that supported me along the way, and amazing advisors. We have such a strong core team at Hedra, that like I've always just felt like I had, like, sure, I was maybe doing a lot of the like the pushing and the trailblazing, but also like there were a lot of people right alongside me that were doing it too.
And then one last question is, what would be one piece of advice you'd give an early stage founder?
I think that it's really easy to like come up with ideas that sound good, but that people are not willing to pay for. And I think I've said this a lot, that free users can be really false signal, that like just because someone uses it for free doesn't mean it's something that solves like a core pain point. I think really like understanding what your value proposition is and like putting up paywalls early and like trying to solve a problem. I'd rather solve a problem that like a few people cared a lot about, and like were willing to pay like a really high amount for. Like is this something that people will pay $20 a month for at minimum, right? Like a ChatGPT subscription, right? Or is this something that people are like, oh, that's cool, but like you throw up a $5 paywall and they won't? Like, you want to find that big problem that like you can solve for passionate people, because getting that wedge and that core retention and that adoption is really important, because you can always expand, right? Like you can broaden the vision. Like you said, like, granola, right, is like, it's just like a recorder, right? Like why is it so popular amongst founders? It's because like it's actually really annoying to like always remember to bring up my note taker and get consent and all that stuff. And granola has made it a one-click workflow where I can play the consent message or record it and like get my notes and write my things. And then that solved a pain point for me, to the point where like, yeah, I'll pay like $10-20 a month for it. And I feel like the quicker you as a founder can like understand the market, understand what's missing, understand a person to the point where you're like, okay, I can build something that person's really going to care about and I can do it better than anyone else, the quicker you'll be able to get a successful business. And there's just no barrier anymore to making a good MVP. Like software as a service has never been easier. There's so many AI coding tools. There's so much like engineering talent that's hungry. Like you really just need to give people clear vision and like, execute on that well. So that's my advice.
Perfect. Well, Michael, thanks so much for jumping on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Wow, what an episode. You're probably in awe. You're in absolute shock. You're like, that helped me so much. So guess what? Now it's your turn to help someone else. Share the episode in the WhatsApp group you have with founders. Share it on that Slack channel. Send it to your founder friends and help them out. Trust me, they will love you for it.